Welcome to this week's episode of Journal Entries. This week we have a special guest, Raeanne Lacatena. She and I have such an awesome discussion around so many things. We jam-packed this episode for you. We talk about how to have it all and how to integrate it into your life seamlessly so it's not like you're doing all the things all the time and feeling like you are doing all the things all the time from a stressful place. We talk also about being vulnerable and visibility, that almost fear of being seen and turning it into peace. We also talk about how she wrote a best-selling book called The Integrated Entrepreneur, and we talk about her unique journaling process. It is so good, and I know that you're going to love this episode. So let's jump right in. Most people don't know what's holding them back, but you do because you listen to me, Sam, your self-care guru and journal junkie. Welcome to Journal Entries, your safe place where you can tune in weekly to get tips, tricks, and journal prompts to uncover your feelings, gain clarity, and make your move. Welcome to the show, Raeanne. Thanks so much for being here.
Yes, and thank you for having me, Samantha.
We met at a networking event. We ended up sitting at the same table, and it was so great meeting Raeanne, and she does so much and has a really interesting approach to integrating like your whole self into what you do. So before we get into all of that, Raeanne, do you just want to share a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So I am a holistic business coach, a licensed mental health therapist, Reiki master, and a certified professional coach, as well as a mom of 3 children under the age of 7. And I became a international bestselling author 2 times over this year. So you weren't lying when you said that I do a lot.
All the things.
Yeah. It's really just one thing. And that's kind of what I teach, is that I believe that business is a brilliantly disguised personal development plan, and that we are one human being having lots of experiences. And the business is a reflection of that opportunity to engage in the internal work to have the external results that we want. And so it's, instead of thinking that business is something separate from us, just like parenting is not separate from us, just like having a relationship is not outside of ourselves, that we are really just one person having lots of experiences. And the more we can learn from all those different parts of our life and integrate them into one experience, the better experience of life we do end up having.
So I don't know if you get this question a lot, but how do you do it all? And how do you integrate it? This is probably like such a broad question, but how do you, like, that's so much that you do. And it sounds so simple and calm and peaceful the way that you describe it. So how is it that you do that?
First, you have to decide that you want to have it all and that it's possible for you to have it all. And you have to decide what having it all means to you. And that's really the most important part, is that what having it all looks like for me is going to be very different than what having it all looks like for you. And so that does require a fair bit of self-reflection. And that's what I mean by business as a personal development plan, that we get to learn about who we are by going inward and really deciding what it is we want. And so as let's take the entrepreneur mom side of things for a second. I have 3 kids under the age of 7, and one entrepreneur mom is going to want to be full-time at home 24/7 with their children. And another entrepreneur mom might want a nanny, and another entrepreneur mom might want daycare, and anywhere in between to support them in the process. So it's really the self-discovery and inquiry process that allows you to understand what that means to you, and then behaving and acting in a alignment and accordance to what you decide requires boundary setting. It requires the willingness to say no when you have to. It requires making yourself available to what is in alignment with your priority versus just taking everything on. So having it all does not mean doing it all and saying yes to everything. Sometimes it means, saying no to one thing to be able to say yes to another. I know that's a very broad answer to your very broad question. There's so much that goes into it. And that's really the work that I do with people, is helping them discover who they are and behave in alignment with that.
Already, though, that answer does give clarity and almost like a permission slip of the fact that you don't need to do it all. And like the whole comparison thing of the way that you do things, it's okay that I don't want to do the same things. And the way that I see other moms on social media do things, like it's okay to either want the same things and use that as inspiration, but also to not do that and to do it, you know, the way that I want to, and to even think outside the box of, like, when you said nanny, I was like, oh yeah, that would be like a completely different option that maybe I would like to entertain as my kid. My kid is 4 years old, you know, so next year he's going to be going into pre-K. And that has been like on the back of my mind of like, that maybe I should look into that. So is this like what you do and what you talk about in the book that you wrote?
It is part of it. Yeah, absolutely. So the book started, I actually started writing it 2.5 years ago, The Integrated Entrepreneur, 2.5 years ago, right after my daughter, my last child, was born. So she's 2.5 now, and the book is 2.5. It was literally a week or so after she was born, I started writing on International Women's Day, because she was really the inspiration for it. That I really, you know, I'm really connected to the mission of serving first my children, but the future generations, and making a ripple effect of change. And so that's where the internal motivation for the book writing process came from. And I have been developing, so now 20 years in personal development. I started my career as a mental health therapist. And during that time as a therapist, I learned a lot of clinical evidence-based practices that I now integrate responsibly with the business owners that I serve. And what I mean by that is, you know, I don't work with someone who has persistent, consistent mental health issues as their social worker anymore, or their therapist. I'm no longer a therapist. And there are some things that are in the counseling tradition, for example, the cognitive behavioral therapy, the emotional freedom technique, that can really make an incredible difference in the lives of all humans, and entrepreneurs happen to be humans. And so we can learn from some of these clinical evidence-based practices. And what I had developed over those 20 years is my own culmination, this patchwork quilt of different resources that I pulled together in a framework that I teach all the clients that I serve, called Steer, Clear, and Anchor. And that was the original intention for the book, was to show people how to use my framework in a service to their business and their life, and to live so holistically. And the book became so much more than I originally anticipated as I got into the writing process. I ended up incorporating a lot of personal stories in the book, my own personal stories, to illustrate how this work has been effective and helpful for me personally. So I'm almost like a case study of the book. And also, with their permission, a lot of clients shared their stories from the years that I've worked with them, 15 years now as a business coach. A lot of people raised their hand and offered their stories as a way to illustrate how the framework and the work that I do has been helpful for them in growing and scaling their business, and doing so without sacrificing their wellness and their love and their joy and their fun and their peace in the process. And so that is what I teach in the book. I teach how to integrate as an entrepreneur holistically, one experience, one human being across the board.
I love that. And I like that you have those examples, because for me, at least, that's how I am able to like put these bigger concepts into like, to be like, oh, that's what she means. Or like, that actually, I do the exact same thing. Whereas when I just read about it as like a description, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. But then when I read the stories, I'm like, oh, she's like calling me out because I do that. In fact, I saw one of your Instagram posts, and I think it was you were at a pumpkin patch with your family, and one of your kids called you out for, I think it was like being on your phone maybe, and you had related it to like how it was just like a reminder of like the whole integration, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that was during the heavy season of the book coming out, was right then. And he was right. I was on my phone too much. It was outside of my typical norm and boundaries. And I received his feedback, and I adjusted, and I knew that something needed to give. We also talked about the fact that it was time limited, and there was like a pretty important reason behind it. With that said, it's not a habit that I wanted to maintain with my family or my business. And so, yes, that's a really great example of how our business and our life can be informed by one another. And so I've since then drawn way back on my boundaries with how much I'm on my phone, especially in the presence with the kids. and, using time with my family, presence with my family, which is my priority anyway, to not interfere with the fact that the business is happening in the back burner too. So really not compartmentalizing the two, but making sure that I'm honoring boundaries and being present when I'm meant to be in front of my kids. And the same thing goes for the business as well.
I love that. And it sounds like that was almost a priority anyways for you before writing the book. But have you noticed any shifts or transformations after becoming this best-selling author and like opening up this whole other branch to you and your business?
Yeah, how long do you have? Because it was it was an incredibly transformative process. I can share so many examples from that. The first major one is that I'm actually an introvert naturally and a very private, protective person. And so as a mental health therapist, we have to abide by HIPAA. And I was like, yes, HIPAA, let's do this all day. I don't want to share anyone else's story. I don't want to get involved in anyone else's story. I don't want to share my story. I would like to keep myself private and behind the scenes. And that worked for me for many years. That's not how coaching tends to work. And it certainly doesn't work when you're building a personal brand. And it definitely doesn't work when you're writing a memoir style personal development book, because it became almost a memoir in addition to a personal development book. And so I had to peel back a ton of visibility and vulnerability layers in the process of bringing this book into the world. And that meant having questions with my family, right? Like, how do I keep my kids safe in the process of being vulnerable and visible? What does that look like for our family? It meant having renegotiations with my marketing and my branding and how I'm going to become more front and center as the brand of the business. It meant having conversation with my clients and asking their permission to share their stories, and seeing what felt comfortable for me too. And as a result, now I just actually was booked in a major speaking engagement that I'm going to be speaking in front of 3,000 people. And I know that I would not have been able to say yes to that with such confidence if I had not peeled back the layers of vulnerability and visibility and the courage that it takes to stand for something, which I do so deeply and passionately stand for the integrated way of life. And I'm rewarded now, even though it was very uncomfortable at periods of time in the process of writing the book. I'm talking like, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe it was nice to write, and maybe I'll just keep this private and secret and safe and never really do this. I moved through those comfort barriers, those terror barriers, it turned out to be sometimes. And I'm being rewarded on the other side. And the other thing that happened is the impact that's coming as a result of this. Like you mentioned, the stories that I share that I was scared to share in my book, that those are actually the things that are resonating most with people. I'm getting Instagram messages and LinkedIn messages and letters from people saying, your stories, while your principles are very effective, I am so connected to you now. I don't even know you. And I feel like I know you. And I feel like I'm sitting down in the library next to you and you're reading to me and I'm getting to know you on such a deep level, and I connect and resonate with your story. And so it's creating an impact in a way that is so edifying and somehow still surprising, but so beautiful and impactful too, for me.
Yeah. The word that stuck out to me throughout all of that is the vulnerability, but also visibility. I feel like that is something that has been on my radar a lot, because when I first started journaling, I realized it was a lot about finding my voice and then using my voice. But also just lately, like within the past couple of weeks, I have been seeing people needing the help with being seen and having it feel okay to be seen. And then like the next steps, like you were saying, like you started to have the conversations to be seen and whatnot. So just a quick question, well, maybe, and it might not be a quick answer, but what did you do specifically to get to that point of being terrified of going out in the public eye potentially and having this public image to being visible and having those tough conversations, and just even not just the conversations, but that different self-image?
Yeah. Well, often what ends up happening when you see someone who brings a best-selling book into the world or gets on a main stage or has a massive explosion in their business is it looks like an overnight success.
Mhm.
But usually that's not what's going on. And that's really the answer to the question, is that I've been slowly chipping away at my visibility issues for 20 years now. And I share one of the major traumas that I had in high school as one of the first chapters in the book that sent me behind stage, sent me like very private and safe, and protecting myself moving forward. And I had to chip away and do that work. And that was the whole point of sharing this work, is that, and that story, frankly, is that it doesn't often manifest as an overnight success, but there are things that you can do to chip away at those fears that you have that can create massive change over time. So sometimes it's just a one foot in front of the other, small, simple steps that allow you to move forward. And I know that you're such an avid journaler, and sometimes we get in front of the journal and we think to ourselves, how is this one page going to make a difference for me? But then at the end of the year, you have a full journal and you see everything that you've processed throughout the year. And that culmination of that complete journal is that chipping away of a glacier that comes together to make massive change in someone's life. And so it's single, simple steps. And what I will add to that is that you never know when a huge chunk of ice is going to fall from that glacier, and it's just going to be this huge aha and movement forward that allows you to step into a new phase. And so you keep chunking away at the glacier until that massive piece of ice falls back into the ocean. And that can be like an overnight success, because I don't want people to think, if they're listening, oh, well, I need 20 years to be able to be visible. That's not what I mean when I say that. What I mean is that there's layers to your visibility, and you can peel them back over time and you'll discover new things to work on. But if you have commitment and confidence and belief in yourself, which you may need to develop also, if you work on yourself in that way over time, massive shifts can happen too. Miracles can happen, that you can be a completely different person as a result of really paying attention to who you are and who you choose to be in the future.
First of all, congratulations on your speaking engagement. That is incredible.
Thank you.
And I love that glacier analogy, because it's so true. Sometimes those journal entries just feel like, didn't really get anywhere today or today or today. But yeah, then you wake up one day and it's like, whoa, I feel so much lighter. Or I was able to have that like really important conversation, or I was able to do this thing without crying, and before I would have felt so terrified to do it. And it's, you realize it's like all of those things that are adding up. I love that. So you mentioned not just, the 20 years and the glaciers falling off, but also it was 2.5 years of writing this book. So what actually goes into writing a book? Because I've never done such a thing. So what is the process for writing a book?
Well, just like building a business or parenting or anything else, I will answer in short and then I'll expand. In short, it's really an individual process. And, that's just what I believe, is that you have to go inward to find what works for you. And to be honest, it took a little while for me to figure out what my path was. I started off writing the book because other people said, Raeanne, you should write a book. Raeanne, you have stories to share. Raeanne, your principles need to be in a book. And so finally I was like, all right, I'll write the book. And because I didn't have as strong a connection to understanding what my motivation was quite yet, or what the book was really meant to do and look like, what ended up happening is I would do like 10, 15 pages here, 50 pages there, and then there'd be months in between when I would write again. There's this like percolation that's happening during the in-between phases. So when you sit down, you do have a fair bit to get out of you when you do write. But what really made a huge difference for me in the book writing process is when I decided that I was going to get it done, and I set a deadline for myself, and then I created a ritual around writing. That was the massive difference maker for me. I'm a very musical person, and a very sensory person. And so I set the same time every single day. I'm talking about even on Christmas. I set the exact same time that I would be writing every single day. And I did a little ritual for myself. I have this candle here that says, smells like she's writing a bestseller, that my husband gave to me. I would light the candle. I would listen to a song that I would sing, and that would inspire creativity within me. I would get the creative juices flowing in those ways, maybe sometimes move my body, and then I would write. And no matter what, even if it wasn't something that I planned to share, I would write every single day. And that really helped to pull the full fruition of the book out of me. And by the deadline, and I exceeded my deadline too. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I love the candle too. And I agree. I feel like I actually, oh, it's not sitting here right now. I have a candle not as inspiring as yours, but I'm also an introvert. And I hosted a journaling workshop once, and I found a candle that says introvert. And then underneath it, it says, smells like canceled plans. This is embracing me and my energy right now.
I love that.
Oh man. Awesome. So at this point, I would love for you to mention, like, where can people buy the book? Because I feel like people are going to want like everything that you're talking about. And then also share what's next, because I have a feeling that like you're not stopping here. I feel like you're like even just building momentum for the next thing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. The book is on Amazon, and it's on Barnes and Noble as well. So you can get it on the major outlets, which is pretty incredible. You can also get it on my website, theintegratedentrepreneur.com. You can buy that. There's a free workbook that comes with it as well. So lots of ways to get the book and to stay connected with me. The what's next is this integrated entrepreneur way of life is really becoming a brand. It's becoming something that is much bigger than me. And it's going to start with having an academy for entrepreneurs. It really is work that can help anyone, which is certainly something that I got as a lot of feedback from people who've been reading the book. But I tend to focus on working with entrepreneurs just because I believe that entrepreneurs are the game changers, the rule breakers, the difference makers, the creative, think outside the boxers. And so they think outside the boxers. Yeah, they do. They think outside the box. And so I really work with these people who want to make a difference in the world and want to do so by creating something. And that's what the school is going to be. The academy is going to be about creating that integration lifestyle, that holistic lifestyle, so that you can have the wealth, the scalable business, the masculine business practices that you need, how to grow your business, how to track your business, what does the revenue look like, how do you build the structure and the scaffolding of the business, while you also understand how to do so from a place of empathy and compassion, kindness, collaboration, and community, or the feminine side of business. And so I'm going to be teaching this in the academy. And I also have an inner circle mastermind that is in alignment with that approach as well. And that's all launching in January.
So exciting. And I love that it's becoming bigger than you and that it's becoming a brand, because I truly do feel like it's so easy to kind of like what you were just saying with the masculine and feminine energy. It's so easy to shift fully into one or the other, particularly the masculine for women, you know, that energy, especially when you first get into it and like that hustle culture. But then I've also seen people kind of give up the masculine and go fully into the feminine, just like, it's all going to happen for me with no systems and nothing. And so I think all with that, but then everything that you shared earlier with the parenting, and there's so many different aspects of life and passions that we have that integrating it all seems so challenging, but it can happen and it's so important. And I feel like that's when you really become like fulfilled and whole. And so that's what's missing for so many people. People want to accomplish so much, but then they do, and then they don't feel fulfilled, right? They're like still going for the next thing and they don't feel fulfilled. And I think that your approach can be that like missing link for them. So I'm loving what you're doing, and I'm excited for those next steps too.
Yeah. I will just add that, you know, that the first step in that is to recognize that you are already whole. And once you start to live with that understanding, it becomes so much more easeful to go through this process of integrating. You're not broken. You're not fractured. You're just one human, and you are whole and deserving and worthy. And that's the work, right? The limiting belief work that needs to happen internally. But just by virtue of you being here, you are whole. And so it's worth going after to get that fulfillment, starting with that belief system.
I love that. Is there anything else that you'd want to share about the book, or anything else that you have going on, or all of the wisdom from the therapy and Reiki and business stuff and everything that you do?
Well, I'm sure there is so much more that we could talk
Yeah.
about. I'm excited. I know that your audience comes to you for a lot of journaling tools, and so if someone is interested in another way of journaling, there is the framework that I was mentioning earlier in our conversation that is available in the pages of the book. I share it completely throughout the book and give a lot of examples of how to use that, and so it can be a nice scaffolding to help you structure the way that you're journaling so that you can transition your thoughts, emotions, and actions more in alignment in the way that we're talking about today. So if anybody is listening who is looking for or interested in another way to dabble with journaling, I do invite you to pick up a copy of the book, and you'll be able to learn that framework. And it's seriously been life-changing for myself and the people that I've served. So I hope that you get value from it in the process of reading the book as well.
I was wondering if that framework that you mentioned was the journaling process. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
It's called
great.
Steer Clear, and Anchor. And it's a framework that will really help you to reframe your thoughts, your emotions, your actions to get the results you want and integrate all those different principles that we talked about today.
So good. Reframing is huge, and it's so challenging to do, especially when you feel stuck in that limiting belief, like you had said, or stuck in that one frame of mind. So I think that that's awesome that you help people through that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I will share all of the links. I feel like we talked about a lot of different things. So if you're listening, check out the show notes for the link to the book and the link to the other opportunities that Raeanne has mentioned. Raeanne, thank you so much for being here. I love everything that you shared, the tangible tips, and also your book. I'm so excited to get it and to do the journaling from it. I think that that's going to be really insightful.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a joy speaking with you today.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's journal entry. I love connecting with my listeners, so make sure you screenshot this episode and tag me on Instagram at samantha.s.says so I know you're listening. And don't forget to grab your free training and journal prompts at www.samanthapenkoff.com/podcast.